Oscar slammed the door to his corner office on the 32nd floor of a sleek Chicago skyscraper. His jaw clenched so tight it ached as he ripped the latest pink envelope into jagged pieces. The words inside from some youth support charity had hit him like a slap. Another request for donations to programs he viewed as nothing but an attack on everything traditional and decent. He tossed the shreds into the trash can with more force than necessary, wiping his hands on his tailored slacks as if the color itself could stain him. When the knock came moments later and Abel stepped inside carrying a rolled set of blueprints under one arm, Oscar forced a professional smile that felt like cracked glass. "Morning, Mr. Rivera," Abel said, his voice steady and warm like sunlight cutting through fog. "Ready to review the final designs for the Lakeside project?" Oscar nodded, gesturing to the conference table. But something about the way Abel's dark eyes met his sent an unfamiliar ripple through his chest. He pushed it down hard, the same way he always had with feelings that didn't fit the life he'd built. At 42, Oscar had everything mapped out. A thriving real estate development firm, a grown son he barely spoke to after the divorce, and a reputation in the industry as the guy who kept things straightforward and old school. His family back in the suburbs still expected him to settle down with a nice woman someday. Maybe give them more grandkids to brag about at holiday dinners. Pink envelopes like the one he'd just destroyed kept showing up in his mail, reminders of a world he wanted no part of. He funded conservative causes quietly, attended church events when his mother asked, and made sure his employees knew where he stood on those issues. Abel, 29 and fresh off a successful project in Seattle, was supposed to be just another talented architect on the payroll. But from the first handshake 2 weeks ago, Oscar had felt off balance. Abel moved with quiet confidence, laughed easily during team lunches, and asked questions that cut deeper than surface level. "You ever wonder if the buildings we design change the people inside them?" he'd said once, and Oscar had changed the subject fast. They spread the blueprints across the polished oak table, and for the next hour they talked elevations and zoning permits. Oscar caught himself staring at the way Abel's fingers traced the lines on the paper, strong yet careful. He blinked and looked away, blaming the long hours. By the time Abel rolled the plans back up and headed for the door, Oscar was already reaching for his coffee, determined to bury the unease under spreadsheets and client calls. Outside the window, the Chicago skyline stretched endless and bright, but inside Oscar's chest a small crack had formed, one he refused to acknowledge. That evening he drove to his usual steakhouse alone, ordered the same ribeye he always did, and told himself the pink envelope was already forgotten. He had no idea that Abel had noticed the torn scraps in the trash earlier that day and wondered, just for a second, why a man like Oscar seemed so angry at something so harmless. The next morning brought rain that turned the city streets into mirrors, and Oscar arrived at the office earlier than usual to avoid the commute crowd. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, Lisa, reminding him about their son Ethan's upcoming birthday. "He keeps asking if you'll call," she wrote, and Oscar stared at the screen until the words blurred. Ethan was 21 now, studying out west, and their last conversation had ended in silence after Oscar made one too many comments about finding a real path. He deleted the message without replying. In the break room, Abel was already pouring coffee, humming softly under his breath. "Rough night?" Abel asked, handing Oscar a mug without being asked. Their fingers brushed, and Oscar pulled back too quickly, muttering thanks. They ended up at the same table, reviewing site photos on Abel's laptop. Conversation drifted from work to lighter things. Abel's love for hiking in the Cascades, Oscar's childhood summers on his grandparents' farm in Indiana. For the first time in years, Oscar found himself laughing at a story about Abel getting lost on a trail and ending up at a family barbecue by accident. The ease of it unsettled him. By afternoon, the rain had stopped, and they drove together to the lakeside construction site on the north side. Hard hats on, they walked the muddy ground while Abel pointed out where the community plaza would go. "This space could be more than just concrete," Abel said. "A place where people actually connect." Oscar nodded but felt that familiar tightness return. He changed the subject to budget numbers. Back at the office later, Oscar's assistant dropped another pink envelope on his desk with the rest of the mail. He didn't open it this time. He simply slid it into the bottom drawer where the others waited unopened. That night, he met his old college buddy Marcus for drinks downtown. Marcus, still single and loud as ever, clapped him on the back and joked about setting Oscar up with his cousin. Oscar forced a chuckle, but his mind kept drifting to the way Abel had looked at the site today, eyes bright with ideas. When Marcus started ranting about the rainbow crowd taking over everything, Oscar stayed silent for the first time. The crack inside him widened just a fraction more. Over the following week, the partnership deepened without either man naming it. They grabbed late lunches, stayed past closing to tweak designs, and once even caught a Cubs game on a rare free evening. Abel never pushed, never pried, but his presence felt like steady ground under Oscar's feet. Then came the company picnic at a lakeside park. Families filled the grass, kids running with balloons. Oscar brought his mother, who immediately loved Abel's manners and asked about his family. Abel smiled politely and said his parents had passed years ago, leaving him to figure things out alone. Oscar watched the exchange and felt an unexpected ache. Later, when the sun dipped low and someone started a bonfire, Abel sat beside him on a log bench. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's script?" Abel asked quietly. Oscar stared into the flames and didn't answer. The pink envelopes in his drawer suddenly felt heavier than before. Tension crept in slowly at first, like fog rolling off Lake Michigan. Oscar's mother called one Sunday morning insisting he attend the annual family reunion in Indiana. "Your sister's bringing her new fiancé, and everyone's asking about you," she said. The expectation hung unspoken. Settle down, produce heirs, keep the family name straight. Oscar agreed out of habit but spent the drive west replaying Abel's question from the picnic. At the reunion he smiled through hugs and questions, dodged setups from well-meaning aunts, and drank one beer too many while watching his cousins chase their kids. On the drive back he stopped at a rest area and sat in the car with the engine off, staring at his reflection in the rearview. The man looking back seemed tired of pretending. Monday at the office, Abel noticed the change immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked during their morning check-in. Oscar brushed it off with work talk, but the air between them had shifted. They argued for the first time over a minor design change, voices rising just enough for the assistant to glance in. Later Abel left a note on Oscar's desk. "Sorry if I overstepped. Coffee tomorrow?" Oscar crumpled it, then smoothed it out and tucked it away. That same week Ethan called unexpectedly. The conversation started civil but quickly turned. "Dad, I need to tell you something," Ethan said, voice shaking. "I'm gay." The word landed like a stone in still water. Oscar froze, then muttered something about needing time to process before hanging up. He drove home that night in a daze, poured a whiskey, and opened the bottom drawer. One by one he pulled out the pink envelopes, tearing them open now with shaking hands. Each letter was from the same youth support organization, thanking anonymous donors for helping kids like Ethan. His own company's foundation had been matching employee donations for years without his direct oversight. The realization hit slow and brutal. Every check he'd signed off on had quietly fed the very programs he'd mocked. He sat on the floor surrounded by torn paper, chest heaving. When Abel texted asking if he was free for a site walk the next day, Oscar didn't reply. The misunderstanding exploded 2 days later. Oscar showed up at a downtown bar after work to clear his head and spotted Abel across the room laughing with a group of friends. One man leaned in close, hand on Abel's shoulder. Oscar turned and left before Abel could see him, jealousy and confusion twisting into something ugly. The next morning he confronted Abel in the office. "I saw you," Oscar said, voice low, "at the bar. If this is how you spend your time, maybe the Lakeside project isn't the right fit." Abel's face went still. "You're assuming a lot, Oscar." The words hung between them like smoke. Abel walked out without another word, leaving Oscar alone with the echo of his own fear. The silence lasted 3 days. Oscar buried himself in contracts and avoided the Lakeside site entirely. His mother left voicemails about the reunion photos, his ex-wife sent articles about modern families, and Ethan's number sat unanswered in his phone. The pink envelopes kept arriving, each one now a reminder of the money he had unknowingly funneled toward the very cause that had just upended his son's life and, if he was honest, his own buried truth. On the fourth day, Abel appeared in the doorway holding a single pink envelope of his own. "This came to the site office," he said quietly. "It's addressed to you." Inside was a thank you letter from the youth organization naming Oscar's foundation as a major sponsor for their new community center. Abel watched him read it. "I volunteer there on weekends," Abel said, "helping kids who feel exactly like I did at their age. I didn't know your company was behind the funding until last week." Oscar's hands trembled. "All this time I've been tearing these up, and I was paying for them myself?" The conversation spilled into the evening. They walked the empty construction site under string lights, hard hats left behind. Abel spoke first, voice steady but soft. "I've known since I was 15. My parents never accepted it. I left home at 17 and built everything from scratch. When I met you, I saw a man fighting the same battle I already lost once." Oscar stopped walking. The city hummed around them, distant traffic and laughter from a nearby cafe. "I don't know what I am," he admitted finally, the words scraping out like rust. Abel didn't reach for him, didn't push. He simply said, "You don't have to label it tonight. Just stop running from it." They stood there until the lights flickered on across the skyline, two men suspended between fear and possibility. The turning point came the following weekend. Oscar drove to Ethan's campus unannounced. The reunion was raw. Tears, apologies, long overdue hugs. Ethan showed him photos of his boyfriend, and for the first time Oscar didn't flinch. Back in Chicago, he found Abel waiting outside his building with takeout coffee. "I quit the project," Abel said. "I won't work where I'm not wanted." Oscar's heart dropped. "Stay," he said. "Not because of the job. Because I need you to." The words felt like jumping off a cliff. Abel searched his face for a long moment, then nodded once. News of the partnership change spread quietly through the office, but the real storm hit at home. Oscar's mother arrived for a surprise visit after hearing rumors from a cousin who worked downtown. She sat at his kitchen table, hands folded, and asked point-blank if the whispers about him and that architect were true. Oscar could have lied. He had lied for decades. Instead, he told her the truth, voice cracking but clear. The silence that followed stretched until she stood, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I love you, but I need time." She left without finishing her tea. That night Oscar called Abel and asked him to come over. They sat on the couch not touching, just talking until sunrise. Childhood memories, regrets, the weight of expectations. When Abel finally took Oscar's hand, the touch felt like permission to breathe. Misunderstandings still lingered. A tabloid-style blog post about the Lakeside project mentioned rumors of personal involvement between the developer and architect. Clients pulled meetings. Oscar's biggest investor threatened to withdraw. Abel offered to step away publicly to save the project, but Oscar refused. "I've hidden long enough," he said. The sacrifice came when Oscar rewrote the foundation's donation policy himself, openly directing funds to the youth center Abel volunteered at. The pink envelopes stopped being enemies and became symbols of the bridge he was building. One evening at the nearly finished site, Abel led Oscar to the future community plaza. "This is what your money helped create," he said. Oscar looked at the steel beams and imagined kids like Ethan finding safety there. The weight he'd carried for 40 years lifted, not all at once, but enough to let him pull Abel close under the open sky. Yet betrayal waited in the wings. Marcus, the old college friend, had overheard enough at a networking event to piece things together. He showed up at Oscar's office uninvited, face flushed with anger. "You're throwing everything away for what? Some phase." The argument escalated until Marcus stormed out, promising to make sure everyone knows. The next morning, anonymous emails hit every client and board member. Oscar watched contracts evaporate and felt the ground shift again. Abel stood beside him through the meetings, calm and steady. "We face it together," he said. That night, alone in Oscar's apartment, they held each other without words, the kind of closeness that needed no labels. The climax arrived at the grand opening of the Lakeside project 3 months later. The plaza was filled with city officials, families, and youth from the center Abel had helped grow. Oscar stood at the podium in a simple suit, Abel at his side. Cameras flashed as he spoke not about square footage but about second chances and the courage to live honestly. "I spent years tearing up envelopes because I was afraid of what they represented," he said, voice carrying across the crowd. "Turns out I was the one writing the checks all along. And I'm grateful for it." The applause was thunderous. Ethan and his boyfriend cheered from the front row. Oscar's mother sat quietly in the back, tears in her eyes but a small proud smile breaking through. Even Marcus sent a text later, "Proud of you, man. Took guts." In the weeks that followed, the company stabilized. Clients who left returned once the story became one of integrity rather than scandal. Oscar and Abel moved into a quiet brownstone together, slow and deliberate, learning each other's rhythms without rush. Family dinners grew easier. Oscar called his mother every Sunday. Ethan visited often, bringing laughter that filled rooms long empty. The pink envelopes still arrived, but now Oscar opened them with Abel, reading the thank you notes and donating more. One quiet evening on their rooftop, city lights sparkling below, Abel turned to him and said, "You found yourself." Oscar smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes for the first time in decades. "I found you first. True or false? A man can only truly accept the love he deserves after he stops hating the very thing that was trying to reach him all along."